The UN Refugee Agency is accusing India of what it calls unconscionable acts of deporting Rohingya refugees by dropping them off a boat near the coast of Myanmar. It says hundreds may have died at sea this month. The Rohingya are often called one of the most persecuted people in the world. They fled a genocidal crackdown in Myanmar a decade ago, and now many face persecution in India under the Hindu nationalist government. DW's Shalu Yadav reports now from Delhi.
Mohammed Ismail fled genocide in his home country Myanmar with his family 8 years ago. They found refuge here in Delhi, but now he's living a nightmare. Last month, his sister and daughter were told to go to the police station for some paperwork. For several days, he heard nothing.
I got a call and I heard my sister's voice. I was relieved to know they were alive. She was calling from a fisherman's phone. She told me that they had been taken on a plane and then on a ship where they were blindfolded and handcuffed. After a few hours on the ship, the Indian Navy gave them life jackets and told them to swim ashore.
They were among dozens of Rohingya refugees first held by authorities and then flown across the country to the coast. It was here, near the coast of Tanintari Island region in southern Myanmar, that his sister Anwara Begum and daughter Asma Akhtar were thrown off the naval ship. One man who also called his family on the fisherman's phone said at least one of the group was beaten up on the ship. People living in camps like this in Delhi are increasingly nervous. Activists told DW that as well as those thrown into the sea last month, the Indian government forced over 100 Rohingya refugees across the land border into Bangladesh. Refugee camps should be safe spaces for persecuted people, but this camp is not. The Rohingya refugees here live in constant fear that they could be next on the deportation list. They're even afraid to speak to us, fearing that speaking to the international media might result in reprisal from the Indian government, who doesn't recognize them as refugees. They're officially labelled as illegal foreigners here. Priyali Sur is an activist for refugees in India. She says the country does not have a law protecting refugees, but that such deportations were against international law. She spoke to us from Washington.
You cannot deport refugees without following protocol. There was no protocol followed. Without any permissions, without informing UNHCR, without talking to the Supreme Court, no humanitarian measures were taken in terms of this deportation, and it is completely illegal, completely an aberration of all kinds of international order, and in violation of the principle of non-refoulement.
She says the Rohingyas' religion makes them political targets for Hindu nationalists.
The fact that the Rohingya refugees are Muslims, yes, it has put them at a higher risk. The political narrative plays into the fact that, the Islamophobia. It plays into the fearful, fear-mongering narrative around that their identities and their religious identities are Islamic.
The Indian government hasn't confirmed or denied the reports of this deportation and did not respond to DW request for an interview on the matter. Mohammed Ismail says it feels unfair that India has forced his sister and daughter back to an unsafe homeland.
I want to appeal to the Indian government to return my family members to me. We are each other's support system. I brought them to India with me for refuge. Please don't torture me so much. I am a poor man.
He's still waiting and hoping to hear from his loved ones.
Well, joining us now from New Delhi is Colin Gonsalves. He is the founder of the Human Rights Law Network. He's also a senior advocate of the Supreme Court of India. Mr. Gonsalves, it's good to have you with us. I understand you represent the petitioners, one of them, Mohammed Ismail, who we just saw in that report. The judges have called their petition, and I'm quoting here, a beautifully crafted story that lacked evidence. Do you have sufficient evidence now?
We have all the evidence necessary. And I think the judge will regret making that statement. because now even the UNHCR and the UN Human Rights Council have confirmed the story that in the first instance, 50 Rohingyas were taken virtually at gunpoint, flown to the Andaman Islands, put in a ship of the Indian Navy, taken to the shores of Myanmar, and dumped in the sea with life jackets and told to swim or walk to the shore. And when they landed up there, they found out that they were in the middle of a war zone. And we had some contact with them a month ago, but we've lost contact. And nobody knows if they're alive or dead. And the Indian government's behavior is so shocking,
Well, Mr.
so
Gonsalves,
appalling. They don't even respond.
Let me ask you about this. Have you been able to locate or talk to any of the 43 Rohingya who, it was reported that they were just thrown into the sea? You said you had contact with some, but then it stopped?
Yes, the brothers and the relative family members of the Rohingyas who were deported have their relatives in Delhi, and we met with them, we speak to them. They spoke to them on a phone. Somebody in Myanmar, a fisherman apparently, allowed them to use their phone, and they talked to the people in Delhi. So we know that they reached the shores of Myanmar alive. Then there was a contact a week later. Now, for the last 2 or 3 weeks, there's no contact at all. And they are in a war zone because we can hear, when phone calls are made, we can hear the bombs going off in the distance.
Mm-hmm. India does not recognize Rohingya as refugees. Instead, it sees them as foreigners in the country illegally. Can you give us a sense then of how they are being treated inside India?
Well, India has become a country which doesn't recognize the law of law, the rule of law at all. First of all, they are refugees. They have a UNHCR identity card and a refugee card. We have judgments of the Supreme Court, many judgments saying that even though India has not signed the Refugee Convention, the principles of refugee law, and the main principle being non-refoulement, non-return, has become a part of Indian constitutional law, and Article 21, the right to life.
But what about
the
the
Supreme Court said that if we are required...
Mr. Gonsalves, if I could interrupt, I just want to ask you, what about the Supreme Court ruling in May? It declined to stop the deportation of Rohingya.
Well, we are disappointed, sorely disappointed, and we have never seen any bench of the Supreme Court saying things like this in the past. It's shocking to me personally. We have been struggling on this case for the last 15 years. It's not a decision of the Supreme Court. It's just some kind of interim observation that they made while postponing the case. The case was to be heard by a 3-judge bench. They said, we are a 2-judge bench, we can't hear it, so we are postponing. And then the judges said things that they ought not to have said, things that don't appear in the order of the court. And that observation that you're a foreigner and you can be evicted is contrary to many judgments of the Supreme Court itself. It's the most shocking development as far as India is concerned, and a repudiation of the rule of law as far as...
And if we just look at the numbers, I understand that only about 22,500 Rohingya refugees are registered with the UN Refugees Agency in India, in a country of more than 1 billion people. People on the outside would look at that and say, why are we seeing this huge effort to deport them?
Because India has become anti-Muslim, anti-poor. There's no reason why they deport them. They've been here for the last 20 years, many of them. Law-abiding citizen, not a single case against them, never broken the law. And I must tell you, India is part of the executive committee of the UNHCR. And I think the UNHCR should take India to task and say, if you are on the executive committee of the UNHCR, why are you deporting people into a war zone? Yeah. When they fled from genocide, you send them back to the very army of Myanmar that committed the genocide in the first place. It's totally lawless action.
India Supreme Court advocate and human rights lawyer Colin Gonsalves. Mr. Gonsalves, we appreciate your time. We appreciate you putting some context in this story as well. Thank you.